at this very moment, you are in one of two states. You're either in the mode of rest and digest, or you are in the mode of fight and flight. Hopefully, you're in the rest and digest state because that is our normal state. Virtually every living creature is supposed to be in the state of rest and digest unless there is some imminent danger and then they go into fight or flight. But what happens if you stay in fight or flight most of the time or all of the time? Well, that's not good. That causes stress, causes anxiety, has all kinds of ramifications on your metabolic system, your health. So we need to stay in rest and digest, but that's nearly impossible in our current society. Unless, of course, you're one of those people who is good at being alone. Now, we're not talking about being lonely. We're talking about just being alone. Not loneliness, just loneness. And if you are a person with autism, that is probably your natural state because you don't like to be in the hive mind, you don't like to be in the tier, you don't like to be in social settings because of the stress. You want out of there. But neurotypical people, that's where they live, and they've become somewhat, as we said in another video, somewhat adapted to the stress, but still it is always there. So we live in a culture that is dominated by fight or flight stress. That is the sympathetic nervous system, and then there is the parasympathetic nervous system, para meaning alongside, and that is where we find rest and digest. It activates the parasympathetic nervous system. That's what we want. So it's actually a good thing to be lonely or to be alone. And let's give you 7 quick reasons, actually 6 reasons. Then at the end, we're going to tie it all together. That'll be number 7. But first of all, we're going to go through these kind of quick. So you want to listen to them carefully and let us know if these apply to you incidentally. And I think you'll find probably most of them, if not all of them, do if you are autistic. But number 1 is alone time increases our empathy for others, and here's the reason. If you've ever worked a job with other people, and nearly every job involves other people, it doesn't matter where you work. Even if you work at home alone, you still have to engage with others. But when you're working physically in the presence of other people, you will notice that there is this culture, at least every place I've ever been, there's a culture of us versus them. People fight with each other constantly. That's the way humans are. That's the way we're made. Now, throughout virtually all of human existence up until recent decades, people live primarily hunter-gatherer existences, or maybe they lived on a farm in the country. And this idea of living, most of us living in a city, or under this kind of constant social stress is not really natural for humans. I mean, cities have been around for thousands of years, but it's not really natural. Some people adapt to it, some of us don't. But here's the issue. Alone time increases empathy because when you are in the stress of a social situation, that us versus them strips you of your empathy. You are not empathizing with other people, you are fighting with other people because they are fighting with you. Now, have you noticed when you are in large cities, people tend to be very selfish, they tend to be rude. I know if you've ever go to eastern cities in the United States like New York City or Baltimore or Boston, those people, not all of them, but there just seems to be an attitude, and it's not exclusive to those cities, but there just seems to be an attitude of meanness. It's like they expect the other person to be mean to them, and so they're going to be mean first. So it's kind of a preemptive defense mode. But if you go out in the country, a little country town somewhere, those people, they wave to each other, say hello, say hi. It's a totally different social setting. They are more empathetic in country towns than they are in big cities, which just goes to make the point that being alone increases our empathy. We care more about other people when we're not constantly around them because we're not constantly fighting with them. The way that I like to say it is, I like to be around people to remind me why I don't like to be around people. Tell me if you agree with that. Number 2 is solitude increases productivity. We talked about this before. But, when you're counting money or something and somebody tries to talk to you, it breaks your concentration and you have to start all over again. But when you are alone, well, then you can be productive because you don't have all those distractions. That is one of the reasons I believe why homeschooling is so effective, because the kids are home alone. They don't have the peer pressure. They don't have the social pressure. They don't have the kid behind them kicking them in the other chair. They don't have somebody pulling their hair, somebody passing notes. They don't have to be afraid of being assaulted when they go to the restroom or being pushed and shoved on the playground. All of those things are just not there. Now, some people say, well, you need government school or maybe private school education so you can develop social skills. I think there's some truth to that, but you got to keep in mind that some of the social skills that are learned in school are not good. They're very hurtful, harmful. Not all of them, but some of them very hurtful, harmful. But, if you're homeschooled, you can still learn social skills. You don't have to go to school to learn social skills. You can stay at home, and you can increase your productivity, and you can be a better student. And typically that's what happens. Number 3 is solitude sparks creativity. So if you're being productive, you can also be creative. Now, when I was preparing my outline for this presentation, I just happened to remember that Ian Fleming, who wrote the James Bond novels, which became films, he wrote those in Jamaica. He wasn't in the United Kingdom in the middle of all this. Apparently during his career in the military, he was in intelligence. I don't know if you would call him a spy, but sort of in that arena. So he knew what he was writing about, but when he wanted to write it, he didn't immerse himself in that environment, but he went to Jamaica, had a little hut built, a little house built. You can actually rent the house he built that he lived in, where he wrote his novels. And he didn't have any windows in the house. He had openings, but if you want to call them windows, but, he was alone. That allowed him to be creative. Now, one of the things that I've learned as I prepare for these videos, if somebody comes in, it distracts me, and it takes me forever to get back in the loop, back in the thought pattern that I had when I was starting. It's disruptive. You've probably experienced the same thing. So being alone, if you are autistic and you find yourself being alone, you notice that you are not only more productive than other people, but you are more creative than other people. And I think that's one of the reasons why people with autism are creative. Yeah, some of it is natural, but it's also because they have the advantage of being in solitude, where they can be creative. Other people may have creativity, but they can't express it. Number 4, we find that people who are alone tend to be less depressed or mental illness overall. We tend to have less of it. Why is that? Well, what is the source of your depression? Anytime I find myself in a deep depressed state, usually it's a response or reaction to other people. If I'm not around other people, then I don't get in that state. Like I said earlier, one of the reasons I like to be around people is to remind me why I don't like to be around people. Because, well, they cause stress, and sometimes that expressed in anger or rage or resentment, maybe in ruminating. You get stuck in that thought cycle. Or you get depressed. It comes out many different ways. So if you're not around people, here I am sitting alone in my cabin, and there's nobody around to make me depressed or cause me any anxiety of any kind. None. Nobody. They're just not here. So I'm not experiencing that. So how long am I going to stay here? I don't know. I could stay here forever. And as long as I stay here, make no contact whatsoever, all of those causes of depression and anxiety are non-existent. So I'm not going to be depressed. I'm not going to be stressed. I'm not going to have that anxiety. So being alone is good for your mental health most of the time. I know there's a lot of people that say you need to have that social interaction for good health, you even live longer. Some people say, I don't think so. I mean, it could be, but with people with autism, that anxiety, that stress that comes with being in social circumstances, I cannot understand how that could possibly be healthy. Number 5 is avoid destructive social skills. We mentioned that a moment ago, touched on it when we talked about going to school. You know, one of the things that just kind of dumbfounded me when I was talking to a therapist about autism is I mentioned to her how I didn't understand what we now call the hive mind, the neurotypical hive mind. I didn't understand how they operated, how they functioned, how they interacted, including fighting. These people knew how to fight each other. It came very natural. And it's kind of like they respected each other because they attacked them. Does that make sense? Not to me, but to them apparently. It makes perfect sense. They know how to do that. I didn't know. It seems to me that you're nice to people that reciprocate, be nice back to you. That's not how it works in the neurotypical hive mind. You fight people and they learn that, okay, this is a guy I don't want to mess with, or something like that. I don't know how it works, but the meaner they are to each other, the better they get along. Does that make sense to you? Does not make sense. I understand it, but it still doesn't make sense to me. So when we get involved with other people, we learn destructive social skills, or we are subjected to them if we don't learn them. But when we're alone, just avoid all that. It's just not even there, not existent. Number 6, we're going to tie all this together with number 7, but number 6 is, it's called Find Your Own Voice. I mentioned that the other day. I actually saw this in an article on the internet, Forbes.com. It had an article that was published, 6 years ago. And it noted how we just find ourselves, we find our own voice, we find out who we are. Because when you are in an environment, a social environment with other people, they are constantly giving their input, their interpretation, either directly or indirectly, implicitly or explicitly. Sometimes they flat out tell us. Sometimes they will ignore us or be mean to us, or somehow communicate to us that we have flaws, real or imagined. Well, it's okay to know your flaws, I guess, but what happens is your own voice is buried beneath the multitude of opinions of neurotypical people who, quite frankly, don't care about you. Maybe your friends and family. Hopefully you have a tribe that cares about you, but by and large, get outside of that circle. And the people are manufacturing you. They're telling you who you are, which is whatever they want you to be, which is usually not good, because they want you to be the person that makes them look good. So they have to make you look bad. I hope that makes sense to you. If it does, makes perfect sense in the comment section so that I will know. But being alone, you just find your own voice. Find out who you are. Find out who you really are. Then when you're in a social setting, you can test yourself. That's okay, but I don't want to stay there because it is so destructive. I want my voice. I don't want me to be who they want me to be. I want to be who I really am. All right, let's tie all this together. So what we're talking about is, when we're talking about being loneliness, some people call it, I like to call it loneness, because loneliness suggests something that is negative. Loneliness actually is very positive most of the time, not all of the time. But we tie this together by saying what we're doing is we are discovering our self-reliance. When you are alone, you are self-reliant. Some people love it. Go out in the woods, live for Well, some people could live off grid out in the woods forever, and they just love to be self-reliant. Other people, they go camping just so they can be self-reliant, and they have to come back because, well, I guess they have a job, they have to work or whatever. They have obligations, but there's a reason why people like to go to the park. There's a reason why people like to go out in the country. There's a reason why people like to go camping, because it gives us that refreshing sense of self-reliance, and that's what this is all about. That rest and digest state that is so normal, so natural for us. Sometimes I go to the doctor, and usually I set my appointments early in the morning, earliest as I can, so I get them out of the way so I don't have to spend all day thinking about going to the doctor. Kind of gets in the way. So I go to the doctor, and it's what they call rush hour, and everybody's rushing to work. And what are they doing? They're all mad at each other. They're all fighting in traffic. Not all of them, but most of them. In a big hurry, and they want the guy in front of them to get out of their way, and that guy in front of them wants the guy in front of him to get out of their way, and the guy behind you wants you to get out of their way. This is the natural state, or the unnatural state, of humans. It wasn't always this way. This is extremely new to humanity. So we get home, and we have this opportunity to rest and digest. So what do? We get on Facebook and argue with somebody over politics or religion or whatever. A little bit of that, okay, you can have your social interaction if you want on social media, but hey, this is your rest and digest opportunity. Anytime you can get alone and rest and digest, engage your parasympathetic nervous system, my opinion is that's what you should do, because the fight or flight's going to be there. You don't want to be in that state all the time, but a lot of people, most people, it seems, are in that fight or flight, and they just stressed out, anxiety. So you have an advantage. If you say, well, I'm lonely, I'm autistic, I'm all by myself, well, good for you. I love it. I like being alone. I don't mind being around people now and again, as I said, so I can remind myself, this is the third time I've said this, so I can remind myself why I don't like to be around them, but there are opportunities there that you need to take advantage of. But outside of that, I just want to be alone. There's a round circle, lower right-hand corner of your screen. When you click on that, you become a subscriber. Then you click the bell so you get notifications. There's a rectangle. Lower left-hand screen to watch more videos. We have a video library that goes back, I don't know, maybe a couple hundred of them. I don't know how many they are. So you can just keep on watching if you want. We'll see you all next time.